So, good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. This is AROMAL from Bulwark Technologies, and I'm the product manager for Netwrix from Bulwark Technologies. And first of all, thank you for all of your time to attend this wonderful webinar. And this is mainly focusing on the more in-depth details of how Netwrix will cover and how Netwrix will impact on the financial and banking sector customers. And before starting the webinar, I just want to give some your attentions, and like all attendees are on mute initially. Also, you can share your valuable questions at any time. And also, all your clarification will be answered during the session. And also, we have a dedicated Q&A at the end of the session. And also, at the end of the presentation, you will receive a copy of the slides and the webinar recording in your mail. And also the total duration which we are set for this session is for 30 minutes. And also we will have a small feedback form will be coming at the end of the presentation. We can just fill your valuable feedback for our related to our presentation. Now I just want to introduce my solution engineer from Netwrix. His name is Mr. Dave Matthews. So he will give in-depth details about Netwrix Auditor, and he's based on UK, and he's also joined. And first of all, thank you for joining Dave also for the section. So the main content, the main agenda, which we are actually what we are doing on this session, we'll have a small introduction about Bulwark and also the partnership with Netwrix, and also Dave will run about the different kind of IT risk in the financial and banking sectors. And also we will give how Netwrix will cover on those different kind of challenges and in terms of the clarifications. And we have a separate Q&A session for your valuable question and answers. So moving into the partnership details between Bulwark and Netwrix, just going to give an introduction about Bulwark. Bulwark Technologies is one of the award-winning specialized cybersecurity value-added distributor in this region. And also we are started our operation in 1999. And we are celebrating 20th successful years of cybersecurity excellence in this region. And we are privately held and profitable since the year which we started. And also we represent 22 plus vendors and their complete product and service portfolios. And we are operating in GCC countries and also in India as well. And also we have 500 plus partners across these two regions. And also we have a successful partnership with Netwrix in almost in the few years, and also it's going in more and time. And also we have our dedicated sales, marketing, and technical team to support Netwrix Auditor. And also we have our certified technical engineers for Netwrix to help on the customers and partners who are into for the pre-sales and post-sales activities. So for this moment, I'm just hand over to Dave. Dave, you can go.
Thanks so much, AROMAL, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. My name is Dave Matthews, one of the solutions engineers here at Netwrix. And of course, I'm talking to us all today about the IT risks in finance, and in particular, how Netwrix might be able to help you to address or combat some of those risks themselves. So getting started, what we find is financial institutions around the world are facing two very closely related challenges. That's security and compliance. So with security, you must keep all of your customers' financial records, personally identifiable information, and similar there, safe from a growing variety of security threats. The magnitude of this risk from those threats is directly correlated to the strength of the security measures that you have put in place. Moreover, with compliance, you must also regularly demonstrate compliance with a multitude of regulations that you're subjected to. So as an example, many of our customers that are based in the US, they're supervised and audited by a number of different agencies. These include the Office of Controller of Currency, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the Federal Reserve, and the National Credit Union Administration, as well as other financial institutions in other countries that must answer to similarly rigorous regulatory authorities. So these two challenges themselves, security and compliance, are very deeply intertwined because many legal requirements are specifically designed, at least in part, to strengthen the security of those institutions that they're regulating. However, the rules themselves, they can be complex, and implementing the proper controls while proving that you are compliant during your audits can feel overwhelming. So today we're going to have a closer look at the risks in finance to understand how Netwrix can help you to reduce them and find out more about those problems and concerns of the banks, insurance companies, credit unions, and other financial institutions. Obviously, what you can see here on the slide, these are 6 common types of IT risks, and actually they've been ordered based on the results of a recent customer survey conducted by Netwrix IT internally here with our own customers. So I'll be covering off each of these points in turn and giving you some real world examples there as well. So first up, I want to talk about physical damage. Now, financial institutions are typically well prepared to minimize this particular risk. These companies themselves will be working with highly sensitive data and are responsible for cash flows. So what they'll be doing is they'll be investing in the physical security of their assets. But nevertheless, the survey results that we had back indicated that expectations about the most dangerous security incidents do not really match reality of what we're seeing out there. Most organizations are afraid of human error, when in reality, it's hardware failures that can cause significant damage. With 69% of responders reporting that hardware failures lead to physical damage of equipment over the last year, human error is actually ranked 3rd, with just 37 reporting physical damage due to human error over the last year. In terms of threat actors, organizations also don't fully realize who possesses the biggest threat or the biggest risk to their systems and data. While the majority of us, or the majority assumes that it's the attackers themselves, in reality, it's our internal or our regular users that are responsible for the most physical damage incidents, and that's 57%. Hackers themselves are not even given or not showing up in the top 5 of the most dangerous threat actors. Only 10% of respondents mentioned that hackers or external attackers were involved in those types of incidents. And just to give you an example, there's a case study we have on physical damage incidents that caused a bit of outage. In this case, it was loud noises actually knocked out computers that were running the stock exchanges across Northern Europe. This happened back in early 2018, and there was a high decibel whistle that knocked out NASDAQ servers for several hours at Digiplex data center in Stockholm. The noise, which came from an errant fire prevention system, caused vibrations that damaged the alignment of the disk drive's read-write heads. So no other customers were affected, but NASDAQ was forced to fly new servers to Sweden, and the incident itself shut down the trading in the stock markets for Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, as well as equity and fixed income markets for Iceland. And this outage occurred until the exchange operator was able to activate its backup servers there. So the second example is intellectual property theft. So of course, financial organizations often hold intellectual property. This could be bespoke tools that help them to analyze and predict stock market trends. And the theft of this IP can lead to negative consequences, such as the loss of their competitive advantage and a decline in revenue. According to our survey results, financial organizations know the true cost of IP theft perfectly well. It is often led by human errors. Again, a real-world example of property theft was a Chicago trader who stole proprietary trading secrets from his employer. So this was over a 5-month period back between 2013 and 2014. A chap called David Newman stole proprietary computer code and trading software belonging to his employer, who were WH Trading LLC. They were one of Chicago's leading proprietary trading firms. And Mr. Newman downloaded more than 400,000 files to a number of different USB drives. The stolen IP that was developed by WH Trading's own internal mathematicians, statisticians, software developers, and traders, this software itself had been developed and processes had been developed over more than 15 years. And they calculated the cost of being more than 20 million was the value that had gone into that development itself. And that came out from the US attorney involved with the case. What happened was Newman, after stealing the data, resigned from the company in March 2014 and went on to establish his own trading firm, NTF LLC, and he intended to use those stolen trade secrets to compete directly with WH Trading. In 2016, he did plead guilty to theft of trade secrets and was sentenced to some time in a federal prison there. The next risk I want to talk about is data loss. So financial organizations store and process extremely sensitive data of their clients and employees. Now, this, of course, will include personal data, names, ID numbers, addresses, financial data, credit card, bank account numbers, payment records, credit history. And if this information is lost or destroyed due to improper storage, intentional damage, or by human mistakes, then it may have a lasting impact on the business. Organizations could have to spend time and resources both investigating the incident itself and, of course, recover the information. Data loss can also lead to severe disruption, reputational damage, and of course, then you have to respond to lawsuits from your customers and even possible revocation of your trading license as well, depending on what sector you're working in at the time. Most organizations do fear human error as the most common cause of data loss, and indeed this is the top cause of the actual data loss incidents. It was mentioned by 46% of our respondents. In terms of threat actors, organizations can delude themselves into thinking, again, that it's hackers that are the most dangerous threat actors. But the reality is, it's our regular internal users that were responsible for 78% of incidents. Hackers lag behind, coming in third place. And again, to a real world example, this was the Commonwealth Bank, Australia's one of their largest banks. They lost backup data for over 20 million accounts. This actually occurred back in 2018 as well. And it was the Commonwealth Bank in Australia who admitted that they had lost backup data for more than 15 years worth of customer statements, which affected, of course, 20 million accounts across the board. The lost data contained sensitive information like names, addresses, account numbers, transaction details from the year 2000 to early 2016. These records had been stored on magnetic tapes, which were sent to a subcontractor to be destroyed in 2016. This occurred because they were decommissioning a data center. What happened was the bank did not receive any documentation providing evidence that the tapes had actually been destroyed. So they initiated an investigation themselves to find out what happened to the data and informed several regulatory bodies about the incident as well, as they were supposed to. The bank, though, did not tell their customers that there was a potential problem. And in fact, it was BuzzFeed who broke the story. The missing tapes themselves were never recovered, and the accounting firm said that the drives most likely fell from the truck that was carrying them to be destroyed. The bank itself wasn't fined for the incident, but it did become the subject of a very public scandal. The Australian Prudential Regulation Body published a report that identified a number of shortcomings within the bank's governance, culture, and their accountability, and particularly when dealing with non-financial risks. The decision was made by the bank not to inform customers about the incident, and it was described by the Australian Prime Minister as an extraordinary blunder. The CBA have publicly apologised to its customers and assured them that there was no data compromised. The next case is data breaches. Data breaches themselves, major breaches, have been hitting financial organisations for years, even decades now. According to the 2018 Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report, personally identifiable and card payment data are the most frequent types of data compromised in data breaches. With financial gain and espionage being key motives for culprits, hackers do see the financial industry as a tempting target. They can use the stolen data to gain personal financial gain or sell it on the black market and use it in fraud schemes. The research shows that the vast majority of our respondents, 76% in fact, consider password sharing to be the most critical security issue. In reality, however, Most data breaches are caused by human error, such as the unintentional disclosure or clicking on phishing links. Unsecured password sharing itself as a separate pattern takes second place among real incidents that organization experienced over the year of 2018, and it was mentioned by 26% of our respondents. In terms of threat actors, we again see a familiar picture. Organizations think that hackers are the most dangerous, when in reality, it's our regular internal users involved in most of those incidents. Again, 68%. Hackers are the second biggest threat to data security with 42% overall. And again, this data breach itself is fairly notorious. I think a lot of us have information or are very familiar with what occurred during the Equifax breach. So I don't want to spend too much time repeating what went wrong or the outcoming impact on those that were affected. But the fact is that Equifax themselves are very lucky to have friends in high places. Otherwise, I have no doubt that they would not still be in business. So let's move on to the next risk itself, which is system disruption. A system disruption or service interruption is the inability of our IT systems to perform their primary function for a period of time. Common causes of system disruption include power outages, malicious incidents caused by insiders or external outsiders. This could include sabotage, DDoS attacks, ransomware, or other, and of course, human error. For financial organizations, this is one of the most critical IT risks, since it can negatively affect the ability of online services and make it impossible for an organization to actually serve its clients, such as performing financial transactions or similar. We all know time is money, and even an hour of system outage can result in huge financial losses. So as a result, reputational damage or key people losing their jobs. This particular case I want to talk about occurred here in the UK. It was involving TSB Bank, and it did result in the UK, this UK bank CEO leaving his job due to the disaster and the publicity around it. What it was an IT system transition at the TSB Bank. They're a mid-sized UK bank. And again, this occurred in April 2018. Gosh, 2018 wasn't a good year, was it? It led to several days of outages with its online banking systems. As a result, TSB's internet banking and mobile app services for Android and iOS were not working for their UK customers. This was due to a mismanaged banking platform migration. Customers were left without access to their accounts for more than a week. And in July 2018, TSB customers again complained that they were locked out of their online banking, which happened shortly after the TSB updated its mobile app. So this caused a huge scandal in social media, with customers complaining on Twitter and threatening to close their accounts with the bank. As a result, the TSB chief executive, Paul Pester, was criticised by members of parliament over his handling of the crisis, which cost the bank's parent company, Sabadell, more than 200 million euros and damaged TSB bank's reputation itself. And of course, it cost Pester his job as well and his £2 million bonus. Right, finally, on to compliance penalties. So financial institutions themselves are subject to a variety of standards, including ones that establish requirements for securing electronic financial records, such as SOX, ones that regulate the collection and use of customers' private information by financial institutions, such as GLBA, or there's the ones that set up requirements for organizations that are storing and processing cardhold data. That's PCI DSS. Although compliance penalties are not exactly an IT risk, they are still a major concern for financial organizations. For an example, failure to prove compliance with PCI DSS will result in huge fines for every month that the merchant is non-compliant, and these range from $5,000 to $100,000 per month. For non-compliance with GLBA, a financial institution can be fined up to $100,000 for each violation, while officers and directors themselves can personally be fined up to $10,000 for each financial violation. Other consequences of non-compliance include the suspension of licenses, legal action, and of course, additional federal audits to make sure that you comply with security standards. So in this particular case, I was talking to one of my colleagues here at Netwrix. He had previously come to us from working in the financial sector. And he actually explained to me, he said, these guys, they're audited all the time. The bank where he was based was tasked with being compliant with GLBA, SOX, and PCI, and they would get audited by the state of Ohio, the FFIEC, at least twice a year. So it was one audit was for IT and the other was for finance. Both audits had a heavy IT involvement, and in fact, they would pay someone to audit them internally for all aspects of this external audit that the state would do. And that was just to help them prepare themselves for the external audit by the state when it came. In a given year, he estimated that they had auditors on site for about 90% of the time. The problem with these audits was the sheer amount of data that they would be requested to provide. So they practically had an extra full-time staff member on the IT team whose sole responsibility was to deal with audit requests and audit preparation. So a fairly substantial uplift there within that organization. So what I want to do now is just take you through Netwrix itself and what we might be able to do to help align you with these risks, understanding the risks presented to your company, and also make sure that you are able to align yourself with security and compliance as is demanded by your financial institution. So jumping over into my platform itself, I've got here Netwrix Auditor. So Netwrix Auditor itself is an application that will sit within an organization, and we point Netwrix at various data sources across your organization. These data sources can be involved in users and access and activities and control that you might have in place there. They could be talking about on-premise. We could be talking unstructured data in file servers or in cloud-based solutions such as SharePoint Online and Exchange Online as well. We also integrate with structured data sources, Oracle and SQL databases, and we expand beyond the scope of what we support out of the box as well with the availability of the Netwrix API. So that Netwrix can actually pull data from other external sources as well using the API so that you can report and understand on what's going on within your environment there. Once you're collecting data within Netwrix, you can then use our platform to find where is your data located, where is the sensitive data located, what are we doing with it. Now, in our example earlier, I started talking about different regulatory compliance, GLBA, PCI DSS, SOX compliance, and similar there. I'm going to focus a bit about PCI DSS because it's quite easy to understand. We're talking about credit cards. And within Netwrix itself, we can actually tell you, well, where is the credit card information stored? Who's got access to it using our permissions views, and who's actually accessing it? What are they doing with it? But before I do that, let me switch over into our classification platform, because the first step within an organization is to actually identify where does that data reside? You know, who's got access to it? Where is it located? When you set up Netwrix data classification, all we do is we simply point Netwrix at your various data sources, and it's then going to start to collect information around the content. So around the text within your email message bodies, we could be looking at the content of attached files or files saved on your file servers. We can even be pulling text from various tables within your database if you tell us which ones we need to collect that could contain that sensitive information. Once that data is collected by Netwrix, it's indexed. So now you have a searchable index. And then we start to apply different classification values. So as you can see here, I'm looking at a fairly significant size file system. I've also pulled some information from my Exchange server. So I'm actually looking at my own mailbox. And I've also pulled some data from my PST files as well, just to give me a bit of a sample of data. If I focus on PCI data, as you can see here, I've got different categories of data that we're looking for. I'm going to focus around PCI data itself, and in particular, I want to focus around MasterCard information. So to explain how Netwrix identifies MasterCard data, which in turn denotes that this is payment data that could be used for payment processing and PCI compliance, what we've done is we've looked at a file and we've looked for several clues in that file. The first here is a regular expression. So that's looking for a pattern of text. And in fact, this regular expression is designed to identify MasterCard numbers. So we're actually validating the number itself. We're not just looking at 16 digits and saying that could be a credit card. We're actually telling you, is this a Visa? Is this a MasterCard, an American Express, Discover, or something similar? When we find that clue in a document, we give it a score. So we actually say that's a pretty close match because we've got the credit card number on its own. But a credit card number on its own might not be enough. We might need an expiry date. We might need a date of issue. We might need a security code, a CCCA number, or something similar there. So we've got these other clues within our search that's actually adding more points to the results. And in terms of what we're actually able to find there, we can find things like terms for security code, terms for card number, holder name. If I go back, we can look at different presentations of the word card number. So not just looking at, not everyone writes down the word card number when they're filling in a form. It might say CC number, it might say credit card number or similar there. So we can use each of these clues to improve the scores and match the documents that we're looking for. In our case, I've got 10 records that we actually found containing MasterCard within my environment. And if I go and browse those results, you can see here the top 3 documents. These are really old credit card statements of mine. In fact, if I bring one up, you can see this is an old credit card statement from New Zealand way back in 2016. Gosh, look at that interest rate. That's making me sad. But you can see this credit card details. It contains a card number. It contains a home address. I don't mind showing this information neither because it's all expired. It's all been closed. That bank is no longer my bank and similar. I'm no longer based in New Zealand. But you can see here, it's a very standard document that does contain some personally identifiable information. And if we actually jump in and look at the calculations, we can see Netwrix identified. There's a credit card number. Netwrix identified it's a MasterCard as well because the term MasterCard appeared. And we also found some additional information such as the card expiration date and similar there. Once that gets flagged, of course, you can then take additional steps with this data. So I could actually create additional steps here to protect that data by creating a workflow. And when I create a workflow, I have options to migrate the data so I can move it to a quarantine. I could just generate a simple alert to notify the team that we've found some PCI data. I can also update Office 365 labels. I can apply metadata tags to the document so that my DLP solution can protect that file. Or I could even go even further. I could go and change permissions on the folder or even erase data from the document. Not that document, it's a PDF. I can't edit that document. But if it was a text-based document, I could actually overwrite credit card numbers and similar there as well. But of course, back within Netwrix itself, I can also use this information to help inform my decisions and my processes around my data governance. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run a report looking at sensitive files count by source. This actually tells me on my file server, where is the sensitive data located? And in this case, if my server decides to load today, in this case though, what it does is it tells me, do I have any PCI data in my public folders? Do I have any PCI data in my users home folders? Have I got any PCI data sitting in my financial folders? I expect I probably will. Of course, it doesn't help if there we go. There's my report. That's what we're waiting for. So again, just starting at the top level, if I drill down onto my server, I can see the different files and folders here. And in fact, what I get is I get a count of the number of files that have also been flagged. So if I click on PCI DSS, we're only going to see results. These are folders that contain PCI DSS. In fact, there's some data in my finance, there's some data in my home folder, and there's some data in my public folder. Now, if I wanted to look further and say, okay, what data is in the public folder that contains PCI DSS, we can click on this report. Maybe it doesn't want to run today. Okay, let me just change my views. In fact, I think I've managed to break it. Good for me. Anyway, what we could find is we could find where that data is located on the server. And we could tell you how many files are there, what are the file names, where are they located. You can then actually go and run additional reports. So you could say, well, I want to know the sensitive file and folder permission details. I want to know who's got access and how they have access to those objects. Or I might want to go and look at activity. I simply want to see who's accessing this data or who's trying to access this data. Perhaps we have a rogue user within our organization who's actually sniffing around in areas that they should not be. Again, I could just set the parameters of this report. So I'm going to say I'm only interested in PCI data, and I'm interested in all activity since the start of 2020, since everyone's been working from home unmonitored. So we can quickly refresh this view. And again, I'm looking at my file server. So I'm not looking at a specific location. I'm just looking at all activity across my file server. And what will come back is results to tell me exactly where those files are located, who was the user trying to access that data, and what were they trying to do with it there. Golly gosh, today is the day that my server decided to go rather slow compared to every other day. There we go. So what we can see here is I'm monitoring for read activities. So I can see, again, there's my credit card statement. I can see who the user was that had access to it, when they scanned that file or when they read that file. And I can also see where they were logging in from. I can see what application was used to access. And I can also see which categories this data matched to. So it wasn't just PCI. In fact, I had performed a data subject access request on myself, and that resulted in some of my data being quarantined as I invoked my right to be forgotten. So you can see different categories were also being flagged up. The documents can be categorized with multiple classifications there. But even further, I can also see failed read attempts. So I can see where users were trying to access documents that they did not have access to, or they should not have access to. And again, we can see where were they coming in from, where were they logging in from, what application were they using to access this data. In this case, they're trying to open it using Windows File Explorer, whereas earlier there were successful reads using Chrome. So someone was actually opening the documents using Google Chrome itself. So you get a bit of information there around the activities and similar. Elsewhere within Netwrix, we can tell you around activities not related to categories or sensitivity, not related to classifications. You can actually just simply go and look at a location. If we choose to look at file and folder permissions on my server, and let me just change. So I'm looking at my NetApp server. I can tell you here who's got access to my NetApp data folder. And I can also tell you how they have access. Have they been granted explicit or direct access to these objects, or have they inherited access? Have they inherited permissions through other data sources, or through group memberships, or even nested group memberships? Once again, watch the spinning icon, and we hope that that will load. I do apologize for this. This is something obviously going on in the background within my my little demo lab that I've got running on my laptop here. There we go. So we get an idea here of who's got access. So our administrator has been granted access through group membership. And if I click on the group, I can see as well which groups is it that's granting those users access. But I could see here my user, Mr. Anton Thack, has actually been granted explicit access. And in this case, I might need to go and have a talk with the data owner to see, should this user have access to this object? We can go back and we can actually look and find out, well, who is the owner based on the properties of that folder. But of course, that might not be up to date because the owner could be someone who created that folder, who the last person to access that file. It could be someone who's changed roles within the organization. So that's where we can run other reports where we use the audit data itself to tell you, okay, here's the potential data owners. These are the people who have been accessing the files. And we can actually order this to show you, okay, in the NetApp data folder, these are the users who were the most active. These are the users who were made the most reads, made the most writes or changes to the files within those folders. And of course, the most active person there will most likely have a good idea should Anton have access to that folder itself. Just quickly refresh that. There we go. And we can see here it's G. Gilmore is actually the person we should be talking to. I can actually see as well, Mr. Thack did make some changes. He made 3 changes, and we could drill down even further. We could go a step further by clicking on that link. That will take me through and show me exactly what he did change within that folder. In this case, it was some removes. So some data was removed from there as well. Now, of course, Netwrix pulls data from a variety of different locations. We can look at Active Directory, changes to permissions, access controls, group memberships, group policy changes. We can look at activity, help you to identify users who have got a lot of failed login attempts. We can see, well, where are they trying to get in from? Is this an external attack? Do we potentially have a rogue RDP port open that's been attacked or hammered within our organization? We also collect state and time data. So we take daily snapshots of the environment so that you can run back. And if your auditors ask you for historical information to identify risks, who was a member of what group that had access to these sensitive objects, then you can do so using Netwrix there as well. Of course, there's such a wide range of reports. In fact, there's over 350 unique predefined reports available. We don't expect you to memorize them all. So that's why we've also completed some compliance reporting. And again, if you're looking to align to PCI compliance, there are quite a large volume of individual reports that you have the ability to run here, again, across different parts of your infrastructure. Rather than having you work out exactly which reports you need to run, we do have mapping documents that will help you to define, okay, these are the reports that need to be run. In this case, you could be looking at completing risk assessments. We could be looking at our access controls or similar there. Requirement 6, develop and maintain your secure systems and applications. So if we take a look at our access control reports, it actually tells you here are the reports you need to run if you have Active Directory. Here's what you need to run for Azure AD, Oracle, and Windows Server. And if I took one of these reports, temporary users, I could go back into Netwrix. Rather than have to search, I can just simply type that in. And there we are, temporary users within my organization. So this report, I can actually go back and say, look, just show me for the last 365 days, show me any users that have had temporary access to my servers. Just change that scope there. And what I've done is I've just looked at users who have had less than 24 hours worth of access. So they've been in my environment, set up on the day and removed before 24 hours have passed. And in this case, I can actually see here's a user, Mr. Oliver, has been added by one of my administrators, and he existed for about 3 hours. If I go back and search, on this user, Mr. Oliver, I can actually see what did he do when he did have access at that time. Just waiting again. I see that Netwrix is still on the go slow. There we go. So what I can see here is all of the activities that this particular user had access and what he conducted back on the 27th of August when he had access. So I can see files being read. So where he was reading quite a large volume of files, I can see files being added and similar there. What I can do is I can also say, oh, there's a bit of noise here. So let's exclude some of this activity. Let's say we don't want to see any files read. I want to see any file changes he made while he had access. I want to see if he made any changes within Active Directory or similar there as well. Oh, thank you, Windows, for that. There we go. And so we can see quickly, okay, here's an area where Mr. Oliver made a change. He modified the permissions of a payment document. So perhaps this is a document that contains sensitive payment information. We can go back to classification and look at some of those reports to see what is the sensitivity of the data here. I could also go and take a look at other types of activities. I can actually customize these reports themselves. So you can get very granular and very detailed in terms of what you want to look at. Perhaps I want to look at all changes within my Active Directory, and I'm only looking at changes around specific times of the day, maybe outside of office hours. And maybe I also want to look at changes where a user was not in a particular group. So I could say, I only want to look at changes within Active Directory that occurred outside of office hours, and it was made by users who are not considered a domain admin within my organization. I can complete this custom report here so that can be saved and run as and when we need to. And in this case, when we run this report, I can then, of course, save it as a custom report so we can come back to it later. I can subscribe to my report. So all of our reports can be sent to you on a schedule as and when is needed, or I could create an alert. So I could actually trigger an alert, which in these cases would then notify either via email, or we could trigger a response action there as well. And in fact, if I show you one of my pre-configured alerts, let's look at mass data changes on my file server. In this case, I'm looking at access to files on the file server, and I'm looking at different types of events. So these are where files are being modified, being renamed, moved, copied, and I'm also including failed attempts to access. I don't want to know every time this happens. So what I can do is I can set a threshold as well and say, I'm only interested if somebody modifies 100 records within 60 seconds. In fact, what I'm looking for here is malware. When I trigger that alert, I can send a notification to recipients. So I could send this out through an email address. I could trigger a response action. So I could actually have a script kicked off that's going to lock that user. Maybe we're going to change permissions on the objects that they're trying to access. Whatever you can program into that script can be then executed when this alert gets triggered. Or lastly, I can also trigger a risk score and have that applied to the user's profile. And when a risk score gets triggered, that means the user then shows up as a potential risk in my behavior anomalies dashboard. So I can see here a number of different users that have triggered alerts over time and have different risk scores. And I can go and review what were the alerts that those users triggered. In this case, I've got a user here, Mr. Brent, was making changes to a significant number of files on my file server. And we could go and drill into that activity back in the search to see exactly what he did. Was it permission changes? Did he change the sharing options? What happened there? I could also go even further, and I'm picking a user where I've got some activity, just not recent activity. But this was one of my users that was logging on to a sensitive server where I have sensitive data. In fact, it was my domain controller, and I've actually captured all of his activity. So I can see the moment he logged in, I can see what windows he opened, and I can see then when he came in and started making changes to my users and users and groups within the Active Directory users and computers. So I'm logging all of the session activity for this user while he remotes in. In fact, I've gone even further and I've said, I also want to capture that as a recording. So you might be using this to monitor your remote users when they're logging in and working from home, or you might be wanting to monitor your contractors, your third parties. When they start RDP or SSH sessions, you can have the recording start at that point. And this gives you more information than not only the logs about what they're changing, but also their activities, how long it took them to complete certain actions and activities on the server, especially useful if it's billable, but it also means that you've got this active audit trail that will be able to inform for your internal or external auditors as and when you need to. And of course, all of this information is protected with a role-based access model. So you can specify permissions, who's got access, what they can do with it. We also have a long-term archive that you can set up to retain this data for a longer period of time. So by default, Netwrix holds data for up to 10 years. You can lengthen that or shrink it, depending on what your requirements are within your organization there as well. But hopefully that's given you a pretty good overview and a good feel for what Netwrix can do, how it can help to address some of those compliance and security concerns, particularly in the financial market. For Netwrix itself, if you've liked what you've seen here today, there is an in-browser demo available. So you can go to our website and actually have a look at some of those reports, alerts, monitoring plans, and data sources in a bit more detail. We also offer free trials, so you can actually download Netwrix now and get it set up, and it will start collecting data and have that presented to you within hours. We're not talking days or weeks to get set up. Netwrix is a very light touch solution. And of course, if you'd like a bit more detail, then please do feel free to reach out to our friends at Bulwark. They will be able to set up a one-to-one demo with someone like myself, where we can talk about your specific use cases and requirements there. With that, I'm going to hand back over to AROMAL, and we're going to take any questions that have come through. And if I don't speak to you before the end of this session, thank you very much for joining us today.
So, hi guys. Once again, and thank you for all your time. And if you have any kind of queries and clarifications, please feel to reach us. And also, if you have anything specific now, you can just pick on the chat box, and you can send all the panelist options. And any kind of the demo, any kind of you want to test the solution, you can feel free to contact Bulwark Technologies. And myself, I will handle this product, and also we have our technical team to support on the pre-sales and post-sales activities. And this is my contact details you showcase in the slide. And also you will have a feedback survey questionnaire will come at the end of the webinar. You can address your requirements and follow up. So once again, thank you guys much for your wonderful time to attend the session. And once again, thank you, Dave, to give your valuable, in-depth, detailed explanation about Netwrix on the banking sectors. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your time.